Tonight we'll be drifting through the quiet world of owls, those mysterious creatures of twilight and shadow. They glide through darkness on silent wings, their eyes gleaming like ember moons in the night. This is a journey into stillness, into the soft rhythm of feathers and moonlight, where each breath becomes slower and each thought floats away like mist. For the next hour, let yourself settle into the gentle pace of these remarkable birds. Let your body sink into comfort. Let your mind release its grip on the day. We're going to explore the hidden lives of owls together, slowly, calmly, letting each fact wash over you like waves on a quiet shore. If you find yourself drifting away before we finish, that's exactly what should happen. This is a place for rest, for letting go, for allowing sleep to cradle you whenever it calls. The owls will still be here, in forests and fields, in barns and burrows, keeping their silent watch while you dream. So breathe deeply now. Close your eyes if you haven't already, and let the world of owls carry you gently into the night, in the soft darkness before dawn. When the world holds its breath between night and day, owls are preparing to rest. They've hunted through the hours of deepest shadow, glided on wings that make no sound, watched the earth below with eyes that see what we cannot. Now, as light begins to touch the horizon, they return to their roosts. Two hollows in ancient trees, two quiet corners of forgotten barns. There, they settle into stillness, feathers fluffed against the chill, eyes slowly closing. This is their time of peace, and it can be yours too. Let yourself imagine perching high in the branches, wrapped in soft down, the world below fading into gentle obscurity. Owls belong to an order of birds called strigiforms, a name that comes from ancient Greek. The word carries with it centuries of meaning, of mythology, of humans looking up into the darkness and wondering at these strange, beautiful creatures. Strigiforms means owl-shaped, a simple description that somehow captures something essential. There is a particular shape to owlness, isn't there? That round face, those forward-facing eyes, the way they hold themselves, so still and upright. It's a silhouette that appears in cultures around the world, from ancient pottery to medieval manuscripts, always recognizable, always striking that same chord of wonder mixed with just a touch of mystery. More than 200 species of owls live on our planet, scattered across every continent except Antarctica. Think about that for a moment. From the frozen Arctic tundra to steaming tropical rainforests, from vast deserts to dense urban neighborhoods, owls have found ways to thrive. Each species has adapted to its particular corner of the world, developing unique features and behaviors that help them survive. Some are no larger than a sparrow, while others rival eagles in size. Some hunt by day, some by night, some in that liminal space of dusk and dawn when the world is painted in shades of blue and silver dot. The owl family divides into two main branches. The first family, called Titanidae, includes the barn owls with their distinctive heart-shaped faces. The second family, Strigidae, contains all the true owls, those with rounded faces and often with ear tufts that stand up like little horns. These aren't really ears, of course, just feathers that help with camouflage and perhaps with expressing mood. When an owl raises those tufts, it might be feeling alert or aggressive, or simply trying to look like a broken branch against the bark of a tree. It's a small detail, but one that speaks to how perfectly owls have evolved to blend with their surroundings, to become part of the landscape itself. If you look closely at an owl's face, you'll notice something remarkable. Their eyes don't sit on the sides of their heads like most birds. Instead, they face forward, just like ours do. This gives owls binocular vision, the ability to see the same thing with both eyes at once, creating depth perception that helps them judge distances with incredible accuracy. When an owl swoops down on a mouse in complete darkness, it needs to know exactly how far away that rustle in the grass really is. Those forward-facing eyes provide that crucial information, turning the owl into a precision instrument for hunting in conditions that would leave most predators helpless. But here's something even more unusual. Owls don't actually have eyeballs. Their eyes are shaped like tubes, long cylinders locked in place by bony structures called sclerotic rings. This means an owl cannot move its eyes in their sockets the way you and I can. They can't glance to the side or roll their eyes upward. What they can do, however, is something far more dramatic. An owl can turn its head nearly 3/4 of a full circle, up to 270 degrees in either direction. Imagine sitting perfectly still and being able to look almost directly behind you just by rotating your head. It's a movement that seems impossible, almost supernatural, and it's made possible by a neck that contains 14 vertebrae, exactly twice as many as humans have. Those extra neck bones aren't just stacked randomly. They're part of an incredibly sophisticated system that ensures blood keeps flowing to the owl's brain even when the neck is twisted into positions that would cause a stroke in most mammals. The blood vessels that run through the owl's neck are unusually wide, giving them slack so they won't pinch closed. Special reservoirs of blood at the base of the head maintain flow even during the most extreme rotations, and the arteries that supply the brain connect together in a large junction, creating backup routes if one pathway gets temporarily constricted. Every part of this system works in harmony, allowing the owl to turn its gaze anywhere it needs without ever moving its body, without making a sound that might alert prey. Speaking of seeing, an owl's vision is extraordinary. Those huge eyes take up so much space in the skull that there's barely room for a brain. In some species, if you could look at an owl's skull from the side, you'd see that the eyes occupy more than half the space. They're enormous relative to body size, and they're packed with specialized cells called rods that respond to very low levels of light. This gives owls the ability to see in conditions that appear pitch black to us. Some people used to believe owls were blind during the day because they seemed so perfectly adapted to darkness. But that's not true at all. Owls can see perfectly well in daylight. They simply excel when light grows dim, when other predators lose their advantage. And yet, for all their incredible vision, owls are actually far-sighted. They can spot a mouse moving in the grass from hundreds of feet away, but they struggle to see things clearly very close to their faces. This is where those bristly feathers around the beak come in. Called filiplumes, these specialized feathers act like whiskers, giving the owl a sense of touch that helps it know exactly where its prey is when it's clutched in those powerful talons. It's another example of how evolution fills in gaps, how nature provides solutions to every problem a creature might face. Owls also have 3 eyelids, not the 2 that most animals possess. There's an upper lid for blinking, a lower lid for closing the eye during sleep, and a third translucent membrane called a nictating membrane that sweeps across the eye from side to side. This inner eyelid acts like a windshield wiper, keeping the eye clean and moist while the owl flies, protecting that precious vision from dust and debris. When an owl blinks, which it does surprisingly often, you might catch a glimpse of this membrane sliding across those huge eyes, a brief flash of white in that golden or orange iris. Those irises come in vivid colors that vary by species. Some owls have bright yellow eyes that seem to glow in dim light. Others have deep orange eyes, like small suns. A few species have dark brown or even reddish eyes, and the color often tells you something about when that owl prefers to hunt. Generally speaking, owls with dark eyes are more active during the day, while those with bright yellow or orange eyes are creatures of deepest night. But, as with everything in nature, there are exceptions, variations, individuals who don't quite follow the rules. While an owl's eyes are spectacular, its ears might be even more impressive. Many owl species have asymmetrical ear openings, positioned at different heights on either side of the skull. One ear might be higher and angled downward, while the other sits lower and angles upward. This strange arrangement allows the owl to pinpoint exactly where a sound is coming from, creating a three-dimensional sound map. When a mouse rustles leaves beneath the snow, the sound reaches each ear at a slightly different time and from a slightly different angle. The owl's brain processes these tiny differences instantly, calculating the precise location of that mouse even though it's completely hidden from view. And then there's the facial disc, that ring of stiff feathers that frames the owl's face. This isn't just decoration. It's an acoustic device, a parabolic reflector that funnels sound waves toward those hidden ears. Some researchers have compared it to a satellite dish, gathering faint sounds and amplifying them, channeling them directly to the ears where they can be analyzed and interpreted. The facial disc is so effective that it can magnify sounds by up to 10 times. Imagine being able to hear a whisper from across a football field. That's the kind of auditory superpower that facial disc provides. Unlike eagles and hawks, which rely heavily on vision, many owls depend more on hearing than sight when hunting. In fact, some species can hunt successfully in complete and total darkness, using only sound to guide them. Scientists have tested this in controlled conditions, releasing barn owls in rooms with absolutely no light, and watching as the owls still manage to catch their prey with perfect accuracy. They would hover in mid-air, listening, cocking their head from side to side to triangulate the source of the tiniest rustle, and then drop like stones onto targets they couldn't possibly see. It's hunting through pure sound, pure awareness, and it's one of the most remarkable abilities in the animal kingdom. But perhaps the most famous feature of owls is their ability to fly in absolute silence. When most birds fly, their wings make noise, a whir of air being pushed aside, a flutter of feathers moving through space. Owls are different. Their flight feathers have evolved special structures that break up the turbulence of airflow. The leading edge of the primary feathers has a comb-like serrated edge, made up of tiny barbs that jut out at an angle. These serrations create microturbulences that prevent the formation of larger, louder eddies. The trailing edge of the feathers is soft and frayed, further muffling any sound. And the upper surface of every flight feather is covered in a velvety texture that absorbs the noise of feathers sliding past each other. All of these adaptations work together to create flight that is, to human ears, utterly silent. An owl can pass directly overhead, just a few feet above your head, and you won't hear a thing. No wing beat, no whisper of air, nothing. It's like watching a ghost glide through the night. For the owl's prey, this silence is terrifying because there is no warning. One moment a mouse is nibbling seeds in perfect safety, and the next moment, talons are closing around it, having approached on wings that made no sound at all. Of course, this specialized plumage comes with trade-offs. The soft, sound-absorbing feathers are not particularly waterproof. They soak up moisture easily, which is why you rarely see owls hunting in heavy rain. Their feathers would become waterlogged, too heavy for effective flight. This is also why many species have limited body fat. They need to stay light enough that their oversized wings can carry them without effort. It's a delicate balance, as so many things in nature are. Every advantage carries with it some vulnerability, some trade-off that must be accepted. When we imagine owls, we often think of them perched in trees, and this is certainly where many of them spend their days. But owls don't all share the same roosting habits. Some prefer dense foliage that hides them from mobbing songbirds. Some tuck themselves into holes in tree trunks or cliffs. One species, the burrowing owl, has taken a completely different approach. These small, long-legged owls live in burrows in the ground, often taking over abandoned prairie dog or ground squirrel tunnels. They line the entrance to their burrow with dung, yes, actual animal droppings, because the dung attracts insects, providing a convenient source of food right at their doorstep. It's clever, if rather unpleasant to contemplate. Burrowing owls are unusual in other ways too. Unlike most owls, which are solitary creatures, burrowing owls sometimes nest in loose colonies, with multiple families living near each other. They're also active during the day, especially in the early morning and late afternoon, hunting grasshoppers and beetles in the open prairies they call home. And here's something unsettling. When food is scarce, burrowing owls have been known to steal owlets from neighboring burrows and feed them to their own offspring. It's a harsh reminder that nature isn't always gentle, that survival sometimes demands difficult choices. The barn owl, perhaps the most widespread owl species on Earth, has a different strategy entirely. Barn owls live, as their name suggests, in barns and other human structures, but they also nest in tree cavities, caves, and cliff faces. They've adapted remarkably well to living alongside humans, finding our buildings to be perfectly acceptable substitutes for natural nest sites. That heart-shaped face gives them an almost otherworldly appearance, and their screech for barn owls don't hoot like other owls, they screech and hiss, has led to countless superstitions over the centuries. In medieval Europe, hearing a barn owl's call was said to predict death. Even today, in some places, people view these pale, ghostly birds with suspicion and fear, though they're actually among the most beneficial birds a farmer could have on their property. Barn owls are phenomenal mousers. A single barn owl can eat more than 1,000 rodents in a single year. When you consider that a pair of barn owls are raising owlets, and that those growing chicks need to be fed multiple times per night, the number of mice and voles removed from the local ecosystem becomes truly staggering. Some farmers actively encourage barn owls by installing nest boxes, recognizing that these birds are far more effective and environmentally friendly than any poison or trap. The owl hunts, the rodent population stays in check, and everyone benefits. It's one of those rare situations where human and wild animal interests align perfectly. The barn owl's ability to hunt in total darkness has been studied extensively. Researchers found that barn owls can discriminate between different prey species based solely on the sounds they make. A vole sounds different from a mouse, which sounds different from a shrew, and the owl knows instantly what it's hearing. This auditory discrimination is so precise that barn owls can even tell the difference between the sound of a mouse running on soft grass versus hard dirt. Their brains process these acoustic signatures faster than we can consciously think, turning raw sound into a complete picture of the world around them. In the far north, where winter brings months of darkness and the ground disappears beneath deep snow, another owl has made its home. The snowy owl is one of the largest owl species in North America, and it's almost entirely white, an adaptation to life in the Arctic tundra. Male snowy owls are nearly pure white, sometimes showing just a few small dark spots on their wings. Females are larger and more heavily marked with dark bars and spots. This difference in plumage is unusual among owls, where males and females typically look quite similar. Snowy owls don't nest in trees because there aren't many trees in the Arctic tundra. Instead, they nest on the ground, choosing slight rises or hummocks where wind keeps the spot relatively snow-free. The female scrapes out a shallow depression and lines it minimally with grass and feathers, and there she lays her eggs. In years when lemmings, their primary prey, are abundant, a snowy owl might lay 10 or even 11 eggs. In lean years, they might not breed at all. This flexibility allows them to synchronize their reproductive efforts with food availability, an elegant solution to the feast or famine nature of Arctic ecosystems. Those thick white feathers that keep the snowy owl warm in temperatures that can plunge to 40 below zero serve another purpose too. They provide incredible insulation, so much so that snowy owls can sit on their eggs in a howling blizzard without the eggs suffering any harm. The feathers extend even over the owl's feet, which are completely covered in dense white plumage, looking more like furry boots than bird feet. This is in sharp contrast to fishing owls, which have almost bare legs and feet. For a bird that wades into water to catch fish, feathers on the feet would just get waterlogged and heavy. Each species has exactly the equipment it needs for its particular way of life. Snowy owls are also unusual in being diurnal, meaning they hunt during the day. This makes sense in the Arctic, where summer brings 24 hours of daylight and winter brings endless night. Snowy owls are active whenever their prey is active, whether that's noon or midnight. And unlike most owls, snowy owls are somewhat nomadic. They'll travel hundreds or even thousands of miles in search of food, occasionally showing up far south of their usual range in what ornithologists call an eruption year. During these eruptions, birdwatchers in places like New England or the northern Great Plains might suddenly find snowy owls perched on fence posts and dunes. Temporary visitors from the far north. On the opposite end of the size spectrum is the elf owl, the world's lightest owl, weighing barely more than 1.5 ounces, about the weight of a golf ball. Elf owls are tiny creatures that live in the deserts of the southwestern United States and Mexico. They nest in holes in saguaro cacti, holes that were originally made by woodpeckers but which the elf owls appropriate for their own use. Despite their small size, elf owls are fierce defenders of their nests, though their defense strategy is unusual. When threatened, an elf owl will sometimes play dead, going completely limp and unresponsive until the danger passes. It's a risky strategy, but for such a small bird with limited options for fighting off predators, sometimes playing possum is the best choice. The largest owl in the world is Blakiston's fish owl, a massive bird that can weigh up to 10 pounds and sport a wingspan of 6 feet. These enormous owls live in the old-growth forests of eastern Russia, Japan, and parts of China, always near rivers and streams where they hunt for fish. Unlike other owls, Blakiston's fish owls lack the soft sound-muffling feathers on their wings. They don't need to fly silently because fish can't hear them coming through the air. Instead, they perch on branches overhanging the water or wade directly into shallow streams, watching for fish, frogs, and crayfish. When they spot prey, they plunge their powerful talons into the water and grasp it firmly, then fly to shore to eat. These fish owls are not strictly nocturnal. They're most active at dawn and dusk, though they will hunt during the day if the need arises, especially when raising young. A pair of Blakiston's fish owls is remarkably devoted. Males and females often call in duet, their vocalizations so perfectly synchronized that observers sometimes think they're hearing just one bird. They form lifelong pair bonds and defend territories that can span several miles of riverbank. But unlike most owls that breed annually, Blakiston's fish owls breed only every other year. Their chicks take a long time to mature, sometimes staying with their parents for nearly 2 years, before finally venturing out to find territories of their own. The diet of owls varies enormously depending on the species. Small owls like screech owls and pygmy owls often eat insects, grasshoppers, beetles, moths, and cicadas. Medium-sized owls feast primarily on small mammals, mice, voles, shrews, and rats. The larger owls will tackle bigger prey, including rabbits, hares, squirrels, and even other birds. The great horned owl, one of North America's most powerful predators, will kill and eat almost anything it can overpower. This includes skunks, which few other predators will touch. Great horned owls lack a sense of smell, so the skunk's defensive spray doesn't bother them at all. They also prey on other owl species, making them a serious threat to smaller cousins like the northern spotted owl or barred owl. When an owl hunts, it typically uses one of 2 methods. Many species employ the perch and pounce technique. Sitting motionless on a branch or fence post, watching and listening for the telltale sounds of prey. When something catches their attention, they lean forward, spread their wings, and drop toward the target with talons extended. At the last second, the owl brings its feet forward, throwing its head back so the talons strike first. The force of impact is usually enough to stun or kill the prey instantly. Those talons are no joke. They're needle-sharp, curved like grappling hooks, and backed by tremendous grip strength. Once an owl's talons close around something, escape is nearly impossible. Other owl species, particularly those that hunt over open ground, use a hunting method called quartering. They fly low and slow across fields, their heads cocked downward, searching for the sounds and movements of prey below. When they hear something promising, they might hover briefly, wings beating steadily, before dropping on their target. The short-eared owl is particularly adept at this style of hunting, spending long hours methodically working across grasslands and marshes. Its flight buoyant and moth-like. Some owls cache food, storing surplus prey for later consumption. This is particularly common during the breeding season when owls need to feed hungry chicks and cannot always guarantee they'll catch enough food each night. A northern hawk owl might stash a mouse or vole in the crook of a branch or hide it in a tree cavity. In winter, when the cached prey freezes solid, some owl species have been observed sitting on the frozen carcass to thaw it out before eating. It's a practical solution to the problem of trying to swallow rock-hard frozen mice. After eating, owls face a unique challenge. Unlike many predators that have teeth to chew their food, owls typically swallow their prey whole, or in large chunks if the prey is particularly big. Small items like mice or voles disappear down the owl's throat in one smooth gulp, fur and bones and all. This presents a digestive problem because owls cannot digest everything they eat. Fur, feathers, bones, teeth, claws, all these indigestible parts must be dealt with somehow. The solution is one of nature's more interesting adaptations. An owl's stomach is divided into 2 chambers. The first chamber, called the proventriculus, functions much like our stomach does, using acids and enzymes to break down the soft tissues, muscle, organs, fat. Anything that can be dissolved and absorbed passes through to the small intestine, but the hard parts collect in the second chamber, called the gizzard. This muscular organ grinds and compresses all those bones and bits of fur into a compact oval, mass, called a pellet, several hours after eating. Usually 6 to 10 hours later, the pellet travels back up from the gizzard to the proventriculus, where it sits for a while longer. Then, in a motion that looks like an uncomfortable yawn, the owl regurgitates the pellet, coughing it out through its beak and letting it drop to the ground. The whole process is quick and apparently painless, nothing like vomiting in mammals. One moment the owl is sitting normally, the next its neck stretches, its beak opens, and out comes a grey-brown pellet that lands with a soft thud below. These pellets are fascinating objects of study, because owls tend to roost in the same spots day after day. You often find dozens or even hundreds of pellets accumulated below a favorite perch. Each pellet contains the undigested remains of whatever the owl ate: tiny bones, skulls, teeth, fur. Scientists can carefully dissect these pellets, teasing them apart to reconstruct what the owl has been eating. By identifying the bones, researchers can determine not just the species of prey, but sometimes even the age and sex of individual animals. Owl pellets have become valuable tools for monitoring small mammal populations in areas where direct observation would be difficult. Owl pellets are different from those produced by other birds of prey. Hawks and eagles also produce pellets, but theirs are much smaller and contain fewer bones. That's because raptors have more powerful stomach acid that dissolves more of the skeletal material. They also tend to pluck their prey more thoroughly, removing feathers and fur before eating. Owls, with their swallowed whole approach and weaker stomach acid, produce larger pellets that are more complete records of their meals. Interestingly, because pellets must be ejected before an owl can eat again, the presence of a fresh pellet at a roost site tells researchers that the owl is probably hungry and will hunt soon. The pellet literally blocks the entrance to the stomach, making it uncomfortable or impossible for the owl to swallow more food until that blockage is cleared. So the regurgitation of a pellet signals the end of one digestive cycle and the readiness to begin another. The calls of owls are among the most distinctive sounds in nature. Everyone knows the deep, rhythmic hoot of a great horned owl, a sound that carries for miles across quiet nights. But not all owls hoot. Barn owls produce a harsh, raspy screech that sounds more like a rusty gate than a bird. Eastern screech owls make a descending whinny that sounds eerily like a horse neighing. Barred owls have a call that's often rendered as "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you?" An 8-note phrase that's become one of the most recognizable bird calls in eastern North America. Many owl species vocalize at very low frequencies, pitches that carry exceptionally well through dense forest vegetation. These low-frequency hoots can travel long distances without being absorbed or scattered by leaves and branches, allowing owls to communicate across territories that might span several square miles. And owls don't just use calls to advertise territory. They also use them for courtship, with males often calling repeatedly to attract females. Some species, like the short-eared owl, perform elaborate sky dances during courtship, the male climbing high into the air and then swooping and diving while clapping his wings together beneath his body, producing loud cracking sounds that can be heard from far away. Owl pairs often communicate with softer sounds, to gentle hoots, twittering calls, and soft whistles that serve to maintain the bond between mates. When delivering food to the nest, an adult might give a particular call that alerts its mate to the arrival of dinner. Chicks have their own vocalizations, beginning with soft peeping sounds when they're very young and progressing too loud. Persistent begging calls as they grow larger and more demanding. The breeding season is the most important time of year for owls. Unlike many birds that build elaborate nests, owls are opportunistic nesters. They don't construct anything themselves. Instead, they use what's already available: old hawk or crow nests, natural cavities in trees, holes in cliffs or banks, spaces in buildings. The snowy owl scrapes a hollow in the tundra. The burrowing owl takes over a rodent burrow. The barn owl finds a quiet corner in a barn or silo. Each species has its preferences, but the underlying principle is the same. Why build when you can borrow? Most owls are monogamous, at least for a breeding season. Some species mate for life, with pairs staying together year after year, defending the same territory and using the same nest site. Tawny owls, for instance, are famously faithful to both their mates and their territories. A pair of tawny owls might occupy the same forest territory for decades, raising clutch after clutch of owlets in the same hollow tree. Courtship begins weeks or even months before eggs are laid. Males call more frequently, their hoots echoing through the pre-dawn darkness. They bring food to potential mates, demonstrating their hunting prowess and their ability to provision a family. Some species engage in mutual preening, with mates gently nibbling at each other's facial feathers and rubbing their heads together. It's surprisingly tender behavior from birds we often think of as fierce predators. When the female is ready, she lays her eggs directly on whatever substrate the nest site provides: bare wood, old leaves, leftover sticks. Unlike songbirds that carefully line their nests with soft materials, owls make no such effort. The female typically lays eggs every 2 to 3 days, so the eggs don't all hatch at once. This staggered hatching means the oldest chick has a significant size advantage over its siblings, sometimes being twice as large as the youngest nestling. This size difference might seem cruel, but it serves a purpose. If food is plentiful, all the chicks can survive. But if prey is scarce, the larger, stronger chicks get fed first, ensuring that at least some offspring make it to fledging. The youngest, smallest chick becomes, in essence, insurance. If things go well, it will thrive. If not, it will starve, and its death feeds the survival of its siblings. It's harsh mathematics, but it's how our populations adjust to unpredictable food supplies. The female does all or most of the incubation, rarely leaving the eggs except for brief breaks to stretch and feed. During this time, the male becomes the provider, hunting through the night and bringing food back to the nest. When the eggs finally hatch, the chicks are blind, nearly naked, and completely helpless. They're covered in a sparse coat of white down that provides little warmth, so the female stays with them almost constantly, using her body heat to keep them alive. For the first few weeks, the female broods the chicks while the male continues to hunt. As the chicks grow and develop better insulation, the female begins to leave the nest for longer periods, eventually joining the male in the hunt to keep up with the demands of rapidly growing offspring. Owl chicks grow astonishingly fast, doubling or tripling their weight in just the first week. By 3 or 4 weeks old, they're covered in thick, fluffy, juvenile plumage and are beginning to move around. though they still can't fly, depending on the species. Owlets fledge anywhere from 4 to 10 weeks after hatching, but fledging doesn't mean they're independent. Young owls are clumsy flyers at first, and they depend on their parents to feed them for weeks or even months after leaving the nest. During this period, called the post-fledging dependency period, the family stays together in a loose group. The adults continue to bring food, and the young owls gradually improve their flying and hunting skills. This is a dangerous time for young owls. They're vulnerable to predators, to accidents, to starvation if they can't learn to hunt quickly enough. Many young owls don't survive their first year. Some studies suggest that mortality rates for first-year owls can reach 75% or higher. Those that do make it through face the challenge of finding their own territories, which often means competing with established adults for the best. Hunting grounds. Owls that survive to adulthood can live surprisingly long lives, at least for birds. Small owls, like screech owls, might live 7 to 10 years in the wild. Medium-sized species, like barred owls, can reach 15 to 20 years. The oldest recorded wild barn owl lived to be 34 years old, though most don't live nearly that long. In captivity, where they're protected from predators, disease, and starvation, some owl species have lived into their 20s and even 30s. Throughout human history, owls have occupied a strange space in our collective imagination. They appear in myths and legends from cultures around the world, and the meanings assigned to them vary wildly. In ancient Greece, the little owl was sacred to Athena, goddess of wisdom, and came to symbolize knowledge and insight. Athena's owl appeared on coins and in art, and even today, the image of an owl often represents wisdom and learning. We still refer to a wise old owl, echoing beliefs that are thousands of years old, but in many other cultures, owls were viewed as omens of death or harbingers of evil. In medieval Europe, the hooting of an owl outside a home was thought to predict that someone inside would die. People nailed dead owls to barn doors, believing it would ward off lightning and evil spirits. In parts of Africa and Asia, owls were, and sometimes still are, associated with witchcraft and dark magic. Their nocturnal habits, silent flight, and eerie calls made them seem supernatural. Beings that belonged more to the spirit world than to the earthly one. Among many Native American tribes, owls held complex and often contradictory meanings. Some tribes viewed them as protectors or as messengers from the spirit world. Others saw them as symbols of death or as creatures to be avoided. The burrowing owl, called Koko by the Hopi people, was considered sacred, a guardian of the underworld and of all things that grew from the earth. In contrast, the Cherokee feared owls, particularly the great horned owl, believing that its presence foretold death or disaster. Despite all this mythology, the reality of owls is in many ways more fascinating than any legend. These are birds that have been refined by millions of years of evolution into nearly perfect nocturnal hunters. Every feature, from those asymmetrical ears to the silent flight, from the rotating head to the extraordinary vision, serves a purpose in the constant challenge of survival. They're not supernatural. They're simply superbly adapted, and that adaptation has allowed them to thrive in environments where few other predators can compete. Today, many owl species face threats that evolution never prepared them for. Habitat loss is perhaps the most serious challenge. Old-growth forests, with their large trees and abundant cavities, are being cleared at alarming rates. These forests take centuries to develop, and once they're gone, The owl species that depend on them, like the northern spotted owl, find themselves with nowhere to live. Agricultural development turns prairies into cropland, eliminating the grassland habitat that burrowing owls need. Even well-meaning practices, like removing dead trees from forests, can reduce nesting opportunities for cavity nesting owls. Rodent poisons pose another danger. Owls that feed on poisoned mice and rats accumulate toxins in their own bodies, sometimes at levels high enough to cause illness or death. This secondary poisoning affects barn owls particularly severely, since they rely so heavily on rodents for food. Road mortality is also significant. Owls hunting along roadways can be struck by cars, especially when they swoop low to catch prey that's been drawn to the roadside by spilled grain, roadside grasses, or the insects that gather around headlights and streetlights. In that narrow strip where wild ground meets pavement, their silent precision suddenly meets something fast, heavy, and utterly indifferent. For many species, especially barn owls that often hunt along open verges and hedgerows, collisions with vehicles have become one of the quiet but persistent causes of death, alongside habitat loss, rodenticide poisoning, and the slow erosion of safe nesting places. You can imagine one of these owls now, drifting low over a ditch at the edge of a field, listening for the tiny rustle of a mouse. The highway hums in the distance, a sound that means nothing to an animal whose world has always been governed by wind and grass. The owl hears the movement it seeks, tips its wings, and drops. In most cases, the story ends as it always has, with a clean strike and a quick meal. But sometimes the mouse has strayed too close to the glittering river of lights, and as the owl rises with its prize, a car passes just a little too near, just a little too fast. These human-made dangers are new in evolutionary time. Owls have had millions of years to refine their hearing, their vision, the architecture of their wings. They have had only a few centuries at most to contend with highways, glass windows that reflect the sky, utility lines that cut across flyways, and toxins that enter their bodies through poisoned prey. Barn owls and other species that hunt in agricultural landscapes are especially vulnerable to rodenticides, chemicals designed to kill rodents but that also accumulate in the predators that eat them, weakening adults and sometimes killing the very birds that farmers need as natural allies. Yet even here, there are hints of gentler futures being imagined. In more and more places, people are rediscovering a very old partnership, allowing owls to be the rodent control they were always meant to be. Farmers are putting up nest boxes for barn owls along the edges of their fields, offering safe cavities for these birds to raise their young. In return, the owls do what they have always done: hunt night after night, carrying away thousands of mice and rats across a season without spilling a drop of poison into the soil or water. In some regions, entire projects are being built around this idea, encouraging landscapes where owls can thrive and, by simply living their lives, reduce the need for toxins that harm them and so many other creatures. It's a quiet kind of cooperation, one that feels very fitting for such secretive birds. No grand gestures, no dramatic contracts, just wooden boxes on fence posts, the soft wing beats of adults returning with food, and fields where the balance slowly tilts back towards something older and more sustainable. If you step back in time, though, the world of owls looks very different. The species we know today are just the current chapter in a much older story. Long before humans named them or tried to understand them, there were owls that would seem almost unreal to us. Imagine Tyto robusta, a a giant barn owl that lived around what is now Italy about 5 million years ago. It stood nearly as tall as a medium-sized dog, around 80 centimeters in length, and weighed close to 9 kilograms, far heavier than most owls alive today. Far across the ocean, on islands that would someday be called Cuba and the Bahamas, other strange owls evolved. The Cuban giant owl grew even larger, perhaps over a meter tall, with long, powerful legs that likely carried it more often over the ground than through the air. Its proportions suggest that it may have been nearly flightless, a hunter that stalked its prey on foot beneath ancient trees. Nearby, on Andros Island, a towering barn owl left behind bones and, possibly, stories. Some researchers believe it inspired tales of the Chicchani, a mischievous, dwarf-like forest spirit whose favor or anger could bring good or bad luck. Those stories belong to the realm of legend, not science. But they show how deeply people have always noticed and woven these birds into their imagination. Far out in the Pacific, the Hawaiian Islands were once home to stilt owls, birds with unusually long legs, adapted to a life spent walking and hunting on the forest floor. They, too, have vanished, their bones telling us they were abundant until only about 1,000 years ago. Other species, like the Mauritius owl and the hauntingly named laughing owl of New Zealand, disappeared more recently as forests were cleared and new predators arrived with humans. The laughing owl was said to have a call that sounded almost like a human chuckle, or the barking of a small dog, a voice that once echoed across New Zealand's night and now exists only in written accounts and a handful of recordings. This knowing that entire lineages of owls have already slipped away, a soft, sober weight to the lives of the species we still have. The barn owls in fields, the burrowing owls on prairies, the snowy owls crossing winter skies. They are survivors standing on the edges of an older, unseen crowd. Among the living owls, some are giants in their own right. Picture the Eurasian eagle owl, one of the largest owls in the world. A female can weigh over 4 kilograms and stand nearly 76 centimeters tall, its wings stretching wider than the outstretched arms of a grown human. Its eyes burn a deep orange, and when it feels threatened, it can raise the feathers around its neck into a dark mane, making its already formidable presence seem even larger. Most of the time it hunts more modest prey rats, rabbits, and other medium-sized mammals, but it is capable of taking animals larger than itself, including foxes and even young deer, and has been known to kill venomous snakes with swift, precise strikes. Within this family of eagles, there are voices that sound unsettlingly close to our own. The spot-bellied eagle owl, found in parts of South and Southeast Asia, is famous for a cry that people describe as eerily human, like a distant scream rising and falling in the dark. In Sri Lanka, that call has earned it the name devil bird, though to the owl, it's simply one more way of saying, I am here, this is my forest, this is my home. Not all large owls are solitary sentinels. Some gather together when the cold deepens. Long-eared owls, with their tall, slender ear tufts and golden eyes, are known to form communal roosts in winter. In a single dense pine or hedge, you might find 10 or even 20 birds pressed close to the trunk, each one elongating its body and narrowing its profile so it resembles a cluster of short, broken branches. It's a simple strategy. By roosting together, they share warmth and perhaps reduce the chance that any one owl will draw the attention of a predator. Out over marshes and open grasslands, their cousins, the short-eared owls, hunt by day as well as at dusk. Their ear tufts are so small they're often invisible, and their yellow irises glow with a watchful intensity as they quarter low over fields, beating their wings in a buoyant, moth-like flight. In years when voles are plentiful, short-eared owls may lay as many as 12 eggs, filling their nests with downy white chicks that grow quickly on the abundance of small mammals in the grass, deep in forests, where branches weave overhead and dapple the ground with patchy light. A different group of owls makes its home, earless owls. Members of the genus Strix, they have no ear tufts at all. Instead, their rounded heads and soft outlines blend with the trunks and shadows around them, a kind of stillness that lets them vanish simply by not moving, because they are so often associated with wooded places. They are sometimes called wood owls. The barred owl, native to North America, is one of these. It wears a coat of subtle stripes, horizontal bars across the chest, vertical streaks along the belly, like falling rain meeting still water. Unlike many of its relatives, the barred owl has deep brown eyes instead of yellow, giving its gaze a soft, almost gentle appearance. Its call is among the most recognizable of all owl voices, often rendered as "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" when you hear those rolling hoots echoing through a dark forest. It can feel as though the trees themselves are speaking. Farther north, in boreal forests and subalpine meadows, the great grey owl stands like a ghost among spruce trunks. It is technically the tallest owl, reaching about 33 inches in length, with an enormous facial disc and a long tail that exaggerates its size. Up close, much of that bulk is fluffy as upon layers of soft plumage that insulate it against bitter cold, but the bird's presence feels immense. Great grey owls can hear rodents moving beneath up to about 60 centimeters of snow. When they pinpoint a vole tunneling unseen, they plunge straight down, punching through the snow in a sudden, explosive dive and emerging with their prey in the temperate woods of Europe and Western Asia. Tawny owls keep watch over familiar human landscapes, gardens, old orchards, and ancient woodland edges. They come in two main color forms, warm brown and soft grey. In northern regions, birds tend to be heavier. In some studies, grey tawny owls produced more eggs and hosted fewer parasites than their brown counterparts. A subtle example of how even color can tie into survival. Tawny owls are devoted to their territories and often to each other. Pairs may use the same tree hollow year after year and are known to defend their nests fiercely. There is a story of a bird photographer who lost an eye after approaching too close to a nesting tawny owl and receiving a direct strike from those sharp talons, a stark reminder that even small forest owls carry the full strength of a raptor. If you leave these temperate forests and travel in your mind toward warmer lands, over oceans and along coastlines, you eventually arrive in Australia and nearby islands, where another branch of the owl family has diversified in its own way. Here live the so-called hawk owls or boobuks, members of the genus Ninix. They are named for their hawk-like profile and, in some cases, their piercing, watchful gaze. Listen long enough in certain Australian woodlands and you might hear the barking owl, a species more often heard than seen. Its main call really does resemble the bark of a small dog, sharp, repeated notes that can be surprisingly loud. It doesn't stop there. Barking owls also howl, growl, and emit strange, wavering screams that have, over the years, fueled many ghost stories, especially when they ring out unexpectedly over still water at night. To the owl, These sounds have clear purposes, announcing territory, communicating with a mate, exchanging information at the nest. To us, they add another layer of mystery to the night. Smaller but more common is the moorpork, or Tasmanian spotted owl, named for its characteristic moorpork call. It is agile in flight, able to twist and turn through the air like a small goshawk as it chases insects. Though mostly nocturnal, moorporks will hunt in daylight during poor weather, adjusting their schedule to fit the shifting patterns of the world around them. Then there is the powerful owl, the largest owl in Australia, aptly named, nearly 66 centimeters long. It preys on a suite of arboreal mammals that would seem ambitious even for a mid-sized cat. Gliders, possums, small wallabies, flying foxes, and even koalas. Often, a powerful owl will pluck a victim from a branch and carry it away to a favored feeding perch, where the remains may accumulate beneath the tree over time, silent evidence of a predator's long residency. Nearby, in similar forests, the rufous owl lives more quietly, shy and generally unobtrusive. It rarely calls outside the breeding season, slipping through the canopy almost unnoticed in deserts and dry canyons. Owls shrink down to miniature size, but not to miniature determination. The elf owl, scarcely heavier than a golf ball, lives in the deserts of the southwestern United States and Mexico, often nesting in abandoned woodpecker cavities inside saguaro cacti. When threatened, it may resort to a disarming trick. It goes completely limp, playing dead until the danger has passed. Then, when the coast is clear, it springs back to life and scrambles for safety. Other pygmy owls take on the forests. The collared owlet, the smallest owl in Asia, barely 15 centimeters long, carries itself with an almost fearless energy. It has markings on the back of its head that look like a second pair of eyes, which may confuse predators or startle other birds. The Eurasian pygmy owl, Europe's tiniest, hunts with an efficiency that belies its size, sometimes catching birds as large as itself and storing surplus prey in tree holes to eat later when conditions are harder. In North America, the northern pygmy owl often sings from the tops of the tallest conifers, letting its high, repetitive whistles drift over the forest as it patrols its territory. And somewhere in the Atlantic forests of Brazil, the Pernambuco pygmy owl hangs on by the thinnest of threads, considered among the most endangered owls on Earth as its habitat continues to shrink. The deeper you go into the owl family, the more variety you find. There are fishing owls like Blakiston's fish owl of Northeast Asia, the heaviest owl on record, which wades into rivers to seize salmon and amphibians with scaled feet rather than feathered ones. There are Pell's fishing owls in Africa, whose hearing is less specialized because they rely mostly on their vision to track fish beneath the water's surface, and who have been recorded eating everything from crabs to a tiny Nile crocodile. There are horned owls, whose feather tufts give them a horned silhouette, like the great horned owl of the Americas, whose talons can exert crushing forces comparable to those of eagles, more than enough to subdue a skunk, a rabbit, or an unwary bird. Taken together, owls fill ecological roles across a staggering range of habitats: tundra, desert, rainforest, grassland, city streets, and quiet farmlands. As predators of rodents and other small animals, they help shape the communities beneath them, keeping some populations in check and indirectly supporting the health of grasses, trees, and crops that might otherwise be overwhelmed by grazing or gnawing. In many places, the presence of a stable owl population can be a sign that the rest of the system still holds together, that there are enough prey, enough nesting sites, enough intact patches of darkness. Scientifically, owls have surprised us in other ways too. For a long time, people assumed that nightjars, those moth-like birds of open skies, were their closest relatives. But genetic studies have revealed that owls are more closely related to trogons, mousebirds, and falcons than to nightjars, an evolutionary relationship that would never have been obvious just from looking at them. It's a reminder that what we see at a glance, the round face, the big eyes, the soft feathers, represents just one possible path through deep time, one of many forms that predatory birds have explored, outside the realm of science. Owls have collected meanings like feathers, layer upon layer, culture upon culture. In ancient Greece, the little owl, Athene noctua, was associated with Athena, the goddess of wisdom. Coins bore its likeness, and the bird became shorthand for insight and learning. That association still lingers today whenever we use the image of an owl to represent a school, a library, or the idea of knowledge itself. In other places, the symbolism is much darker. In parts of medieval Europe, hearing an owl outside your house at night was considered an omen of death or misfortune. People nailed dead owls to barn doors, believing their bodies would ward off lightning or evil spirits. In some Asian traditions, owls are divided between positive and negative, meaning sometimes thought to bring fortune, sometimes associated with bad luck or unsettling energies, depending on the region and the story. Across parts of Africa and the Americas, they appear in tales as messengers, as watchers between worlds, sometimes feared, sometimes respected. All of these beliefs are non-scientific, reflections of human attempts to explain sounds and shapes in the dark. The owl itself simply continues its quiet rounds, unaware of the stories people tell about it. The same call that one culture hears as an omen of death, another hears as a sign of wisdom, and the owl hears as part of an everyday conversation about territory, food, and family. If you imagine yourself now beneath a clear night sky, somewhere away from the noise of traffic and the glow of city lights, you might begin to notice how much of the world is still awake when we are ready to sleep. Somewhere, a barn owl glides like a pale shadow along the edge of a meadow, its face turned toward the faintest sounds in the grass. On a rocky headland, a little owl watches from a stone ledge, blinking slowly, head tilting as it tracks the movements of beetles and small rodents. Far to the north, a snowy owl scans the open tundra, feathers puffed against the wind, waiting for a lemming to break cover high in a forest. A tawny owl closes its eyes at last, having hunted through the deepest hours of the night. Its mate dozes in a nearby hollow, and the young, now nearly grown, preen and stretch on their branch, feathers whispering softly. In another part of the world, a powerful owl is just setting out, leaving its daytime roost as the first stars appear, while a collared owlet finishes its day's work and slips into a tree cavity to rest. Across time zones and across continents, owls are constantly trading places, some waking, some sleeping, some migrating, some staying faithful to the same patch of woods for decades. A few species may live only a handful of years. Others may survive for 20 in the wild and much longer under human care. But all of them share the same essential rhythm: watch, listen, wait, move with care as you lie here listening. Your own breathing has perhaps slowed a little. Your thoughts may feel less sharp, more hazy around the edges, like distant treetops in a light mist. This, too, is a kind of twilighter, quiet space between full wakefulness and sleep, where information becomes less important than feeling, and details become less important than mood. In that space, the facts we've wandered through, movable neck bones, feathered feet, ancient extinct giants, desert-dwelling miniatures, eerie calls and gentle hoot scans simply float, unhurried, without needing to be remembered or organized. You might picture a single owl now, whichever one your mind chooses. Perhaps it's a barn owl on the beam of an old barn, or a burrowing owl peeking from the entrance of its earthy home, or a tiny elf owl huddled inside a cactus hollow. Maybe it's the classic silhouette on a branch against the moon, head slightly turned, body completely still. Around it, the night is not empty, but full of insects, of wind, of distant water, of the rustle of small feet in grass. The owl listens, as it has listened for countless generations, and the world goes on. In that sense, owls are companions to our sleep. For as long as humans have rested in caves, huts, and houses, owls have been awake nearby, flying their silent routes, tracing invisible paths over our roofs and fields. They have watched our fires, our streetlights, our quiet backyards. They have nested in the beams of our barns and the rafters of our churches, taken up residence in the cavities of trees we pass every day without noticing. While we dream, they keep their own watch, not for us, but alongside us. So as this journey through their world slows to its end, you don't need to hold on to every detail. You don't need to remember how many vertebrae are in an owl's neck, or how far beneath the snow a great grey owl can hear a mouse, or which ancient island species once walked instead of flew. All of that can drift away now, like the echo of a distant hoot fading into the trees. What can remain is something simpler, a sense of quiet admiration for these birds of shadow and light, for their resilience and their fragility, for the way they make the night feel both a little stranger and a little more alive. Let your eyes grow heavy, if they aren't closed already. Let your body sink a little deeper into whatever is supporting you. Somewhere out there, an owl is lifting from its perch, wings opening in a motion so smooth it barely disturbs the air. It glides forward into the dark, guided by senses tuned far beyond ours. You don't need to follow. You can stay right here, safe and warm, letting your own night unfold at a much softer pace. And if you enjoyed this slow journey through the hidden lives of owls, you're always welcome to return. There are many more worlds to wander through together, many more gentle stories to fall asleep to. If you'd like to drift off with more calm explorations like this one, feel free to subscribe for more soothing journeys whenever you're ready to go AFK and rest.